Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I never planned to move to Germany. I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, and I always imagined I'd stay close to home. After graduating with my degree in software engineering, I struggled to find work during the recession. Then, out of nowhere, a German tech company offered me a position in their Berlin office. The salary wasn't amazing, but it included relocation assistance and a work visa. After months of sending out applications with no success, I decided to take the leap. The first few months were rough. The culture shock, the language barrier, and the loneliness of being in a foreign country hit me harder than I expected. But slowly things started falling into place. I found my groove at work, made some friends, and even started getting comfortable with German. The only thing missing was a permanent place to call home. I spent 6 months bouncing between temporary rentals and shared apartments before I finally found my current place. It wasn't fancy, but it was in a decent neighborhood, close to public transport, and most importantly, affordable. After viewing nearly 30 apartments and dealing with countless rejection letters, finally getting those keys felt like winning the lottery. About a year into my lease, I received a letter that made my stomach drop. The property manager wrote that they were terminating my rental agreement in 30 days. They said if I wanted to continue living there, I would need to sign their enclosed contract with updated terms. The letter mentioned that the new monthly rent would be increased by 35%, and if I didn't comply, they would start immediate eviction proceedings. I felt sick. The housing market had exploded since I'd moved in, and finding another affordable apartment seemed impossible. I couldn't sleep that night, wondering if I'd have to give up everything I built here and crawl back to the US in defeat. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. During lunch, I mentioned the situation to my co-workers. I expressed my confusion about how they could do this when I'd never missed a rent payment. That's when one of my co-workers asked if I'd contacted a Mieterverein. When I asked what that was, they explained it was an organization that helps tenants with legal issues, and that they were really good at dealing with these situations. That afternoon, I found the nearest Mieterverein office and practically ran there after work. The receptionist was a kind elderly woman who helped me fill out the paperwork despite my broken German. When I met with their lawyer, she was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who reminded me of my high school principal. She read through my documents silently, occasionally making sounds that did nothing to calm my nerves. Finally, she looked up and adjusted her glasses. She said the letter was completely invalid and that they couldn't do this. When I asked what she meant, she explained that my contract specifically stated that no changes could be made without both parties' consent. She clarified that they couldn't force me to accept a new contract or evict me for refusing it, and that this was a common tactic used by some property companies to intimidate foreign tenants who might not know their rights. She drafted a response letter that was probably the most politely worded go-to-hell I'd ever read. A month later, I received another letter from the property company. In it, they apologized for any confusion and claimed that the previous letter had been sent in error by an employee who was no longer with their company, asking me to disregard it. Every year, like clockwork, they send the same threatening letter with slightly different wording. And every year, my lawyer would respond with increasingly stern warnings. This went on for 7 years until finally, after their 8th attempt, my lawyer sent them what I like to call the nuclear option. She not only threatened legal action for harassment, but also reported them to the housing authority for systematic attempts to intimidate tenants. She included documentation of all 8 attempts, plus evidence they'd tried the same tactic with other foreign tenants in their properties. 2 weeks later, I received a formal apology letter from their CEO, along with a guarantee that my rent would remain unchanged for the next 5 years as compensation for the misunderstanding. The property manager who had been sending the letters was reassigned, and I later heard that several other foreign tenants in their properties received similar apology letters. I still live in that apartment, paying the same rent I agreed to 8 years ago, while similar units in my building go for almost double. Sometimes I wonder if they have a calendar reminder set for "Don't try to evict that annoying American tenant again." Either way, I'm not going anywhere. Let me give you some context. My wife and I moved to this quiet suburban neighborhood about 5 years ago. We were drawn to the peaceful atmosphere and the large backyard that would be perfect for our 2 kids. The house needed some work, but I'm pretty handy with tools, having learned everything from my father, who was a contractor. Everything was perfect until about 6 months ago when our next-door neighbor moved away and sold their house to this woman. From day one, she was different. She complained about everything: the way we parked our car, the color we painted our fence, even the wind chimes we had hanging on our porch. But we tried to be understanding, thinking maybe she just needed time to adjust to the neighborhood. I work from home as a software developer, and my wife is a veterinarian at the local animal hospital. Our kids are 8 and 10, and we've always taught them to be kind to animals. We even set up bird feeders in our backyard, which attracted all sorts of beautiful birds, including several crows that became regular visitors. But everything changed one morning in ways I never could have imagined. I was sleeping peacefully with my family when suddenly we heard a loud crash downstairs. Here's how it all went down. Earlier that morning, as I later saw on my security footage, Karen rushed out of her house in her bathrobe, screaming at the crow to get out, calling it a filthy creature. The crow, who was just sitting quietly on her mailbox, tilted its head in confusion. She yelled again, claiming the mailbox was her property and demanding the crow leave. The crow calmly flew over to my fence, probably thinking that would solve the problem. But oh no, that wasn't enough for Karen. She started ranting about how the crow was mocking her and threatened to show it what she could do. She stormed back into her house, and what happened next still sends chills down my spine. She came back out with a rifle, an actual firearm, and aimed it at the crow. Bang! The bullet grazed the crow's wing and continued its trajectory straight through my living room window. The sound of shattering glass jolted us all awake. I shouted in shock, asking what had happened. My wife called out, worried about the kids, while they cried out for me, scared and confused. I rushed downstairs to find glass everywhere and a hole in my window. Through the broken glass, I saw Karen scurrying back to her house like a cockroach when the lights come on. I immediately called the police, reporting that someone had shot at my house and mentioning that I had it all on camera. When the police arrived, the officer told Karen she needed to come with them. Karen tried to defend herself, explaining that she wasn't shooting at our house but trying to get rid of what she called a nasty crow that she claimed was tormenting her. The officer told her that she had discharged a firearm in a residential area and damaged property, asking her to put her hands behind her back. Karen became hysterical, insisting the crow was plotting something and that all the crows were conspiring against her. While this was happening, my wife and kids had carefully approached the injured crow. My wife examined it and declared that the poor thing was badly hurt and needed immediate medical attention at the clinic. My wife's expertise as a veterinarian came in handy. After surgery, the crow survived but would never fly again. We set up a comfortable space in our backyard for him to recover, complete with everything he needed. We decided not to press charges for the property damage, realizing Karen needed help more than punishment. However, we did consult with a lawyer about getting her firearms removed, concerned about everyone's safety. One morning, about a week later, I woke up to what sounded like hundreds of birds. Looking out my window, I couldn't believe my eyes. There must have been at least 50 crows covering Karen's house, methodically dropping various items: twisted metal, plastic bags, old food wrappers, even small branches, all over her property. Karen ran out in panic, screaming for help. The crows responded by diving at her, causing her to retreat inside. She called the police, hysterically complaining about birds attacking her house and claiming harassment. When the police arrived, they just stood there, completely baffled. The officer awkwardly explained to Karen that they couldn't arrest birds. Karen demanded they shoot the crows, but the officer had to inform her that they couldn't do that either, as they were protected wildlife. This went on for weeks. Every morning, the crows would arrive, deposit their gifts, and keep watch. They never bothered anyone else in the neighborhood, just Karen. Eventually, she couldn't take it anymore. One morning, I saw a moving truck outside her house. When she was leaving, a single crow, our injured friend, sat on my fence watching her go. The murder of crows that had been tormenting her gathered on the surrounding trees, as if to make sure she really was leaving. As she loaded her last box, she ranted about how the neighborhood was cursed and we were all crazy. The moment her car pulled away, the crows dispersed, never to gather in such numbers again. Though our injured crow stayed with us, becoming part of our family in a way, we named him Justice, and he's now a neighborhood mascot of sorts. I also learned that Karen moved to an apartment in the city. I guess she decided that suburban life and wildlife wasn't for her after all. I've been working at Adventure World theme park for about 3 years now, and I absolutely love my job as a roller coaster operator. After finishing my engineering degree, I realized I wanted to work with these amazing machines hands-on before jumping into design work. Plus, the joy on people's faces when they get off the rides makes every day worth it. I work on the park's newest coaster, the Thunderbolt. It's a beast of a machine, all steel, 3 inversions, and a top speed of 70 miles per hour. Operating it isn't just pushing buttons. We have a complex system with 3 control panels. 2 are on the platform where riders board, and 1 main panel is in an elevated control room overlooking everything. We need all 3 stations working in perfect sync to keep the ride running safely. This story happened about a month ago during peak season. It was a busy Saturday afternoon and I was manning the main control panel. In the observation room was my shift supervisor. The platform below was packed with excited riders, and my 2 colleagues were doing their usual safety checks, making sure everyone was properly secured. My supervisor asked me if everything was clear for the next batch of riders. I confirmed that all systems were good and told him I was opening the gates. As I hit the button to let the next group through, I noticed this teenager, probably around 15 or 16, looking suspiciously at one of the platform control panels while getting in line. Something about his body language just seemed off, but I figured I was being paranoid. The platform operators were busy checking harnesses on the other side of the coaster when this kid made his move. Quick as lightning, he reached over and slammed his hand on the emergency stop button. The entire ride system shut down instantly with that horrible grinding sound that makes every operator cringe. I started to ask if the kid had really done what I thought I saw, but before I could finish, my supervisor was already on the radio calling for security. He reported that we had a deliberate emergency stop activation by a guest. The kid had the audacity to laugh and high-five his friends like he'd just done something impressive. What he didn't realize was that our security team takes ride interference very seriously. We have cameras covering every angle of the platform, and they caught his little stunt in perfect HD. The real consequences started hitting when he realized we weren't just going to restart the ride. Emergency stops require a complete system reset and safety check. That's 10-15 minutes minimum. The whole queue of people started getting restless, and all eyes were on him. Security arrived within 2 minutes. They are always nearby during peak hours. 2 officers approached the teenager's group. One of the security officers told the teenager he needed to come with them. The teenager tried to brush it off, claiming it was just a joke and that he hadn't broken anything. The security officer explained that interfering with ride operations was a serious safety violation and that they would need to discuss this with his parents. The kid's face went from smug to scared real quick. He stammered out that his parents weren't there and that he had come with his friends. The security officer simply replied that they would need to call his parents and asked him again to come to the security office. His friends suddenly weren't laughing anymore. They just stood there awkwardly as security escorted him away. But here's where it gets even better. Turns out his parents were actually in the park, just in a different section. They showed up at the security office about 20 minutes later, and they were not happy. I heard later from one of the security officers that the parents had to pay a fine for ride interference, and their son got banned from the park for 6 months. They also had to sign an agreement acknowledging that any future safety violations would result in a permanent ban. The dad made the kids stand near the exit and apologized to every single person who had to wait because of his joke, all 200 plus people who were in line. The mom also insisted he write a formal apology letter to the park staff. I've seen plenty of entitled behavior working at theme parks, but this one sticks with me because of how quickly it backfired on the kid. We take safety seriously, and no one's joke is worth risking people's lives over. Some of these teenagers think it's funny to mess with the rides, but they don't realize these machines aren't toys. They're complex systems designed to safely handle high speeds and forces. The rest of that day went smoothly, but I'll never forget the look on that kid's face when he realized his cool prank had turned into one very expensive lesson. His parents ended up being the real MVPs, taking responsibility and making sure their son understood the gravity of his actions. They even made him do some research on roller coaster safety systems and write a report about it. Ever since getting my license last year, my car has been my pride and joy. Just a used 2015 Honda Civic bought with 2 years of savings from my weekend job at the hardware store. Living in a small Georgia town means everyone knows everyone, or at least that's what I thought until starting high school, where we combine with 2 other nearby towns. Last Thursday, I lucked out and found 2 empty spots next to each other in the school parking lot. Practically a miracle. The day went normally, and my 2 best friends were coming over after school to work on our physics project. But when we returned to my car after the last bell, my heart literally dropped to my stomach. The entire left side was destroyed. Both doors dented in so badly they wouldn't open. Side mirror completely ripped off, tail light smashed to pieces, and the bumper hanging like a broken arm. Whatever car had been parked next to me was long gone. I called my dad, who left work immediately, to contact the police. Without security cameras in the lot, there wasn't much they could do. While processing everything in my garage later, my friend's phone buzzed with news. His girlfriend had seen a girl from school whose truck was all messed up on the right side. Better yet, my other friend's brother had witnessed her parking next to me that morning. The girl drove this massive red pickup truck that stuck out like a sore thumb. Her family was well off. Mom taught at the middle school. Dad was an elementary school principal. She worked part-time at the grocery store. Definitely not hauling anything that would require such a huge truck. When we drove to her house, we found her truck was matching damage. She came storming out, screaming at us to leave her property, followed by her father threatening to call the police. The next day, I got called to the principal's office. There she was with her dad and, surprise, surprise, her uncle, the police chief. They suspended me for harassment without even letting me call my own father. That's when I got smart. My dad had already filed an insurance claim, and the investigator had documented everything, including paint transfers that perfectly matched her truck's shade of red. We hired a lawyer specializing in property damage cases and filed a civil suit. The evidence was overwhelming. Paint analysis, witness statements from multiple students who saw her truck parked next to mine, and security footage from a convenience store across the street showing her truck leaving the scene with visible damage. The school board got involved when they discovered I'd been suspended without due process and under pressure from a student's family member. Not only was my suspension reversed, but both the principal and police chief came under investigation for abuse of authority. Her parents ended up paying for all damages, plus my rental car costs. She lost her truck privileges and now takes the bus to school. The whole experience taught me something about standing up for what's right, even when facing powerful opposition. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.